very favorite psalms. It's always hard to pick a favorite psalm, right? It's like picking a favorite child. But this one really is one of my favorites. And after we read it, you're probably going to wonder why. But don't worry. By the time we're done, you'll know why. You'll at least know why it's my favorite. I don't know if it'll be yours or not, but you'll know why mine. Just to give you a sort of where we are, I want to remind you of our 5 books of the Psalms. Okay, just as sort of a where are we now. We talked already about these, how they probably represent compositional stages. This is probably how the Psalms came together. Just like you keep adding hymns to your hymn book, you keep adding psalms as it goes, a little bit at a time. But as we go through this, as we've seen, book 1 and 2 are very focused on the kingship and David, and most of David's psalms are there, and so those are all about probably most of them before the exile. Book 3 is where we are today. We're doing Psalm 88, and book 3 is an exilic book. Book 3 is a book of the people of Judah trying to wrestle with the reality of exile and what that means. They have lost their land, they have lost their country, they have lost their king. How do you handle a dark night of the soul like that? How do you process it? And really, as you go through book 3, it cycles up and down. It goes from hope to despair. Particularly as you start getting toward the end, you'll have Psalms like 84, which celebrate the temple, and then 85, which asks questions, and 86, which asks questions, and 87, which celebrates the land, and then 88, and then 89. I mean, so there's all sorts of, it's really a roller coaster here all through book 3 as they try to hold on to hope, but they're faced with the reality of pain and trouble and frustration in the world. So as we go through Psalm 88, I think I want to keep that in mind. You want to keep in mind the frustration and the struggle as they're trying to hold on to both of those things as we go. Okay? Yes?
I thought you would assign us to read Job.
Well,
88 is...
Psalm 88, Job 3, and Jeremiah 20 are our 3 darkest passages in the whole Bible. And I suppose if I was ranking them, Job 3 is probably the darkest, followed by Psalm 88 and Jeremiah 20. Jeremiah 20, Jeremiah just wishes he had never been born. So still dark, but not as bad as Job, who wishes no one else had either. So it's a little darker in Job. But this is one of these very, very dark passages as we get through it. And something to keep in mind, along with remembering this is a dark psalm, is it's a psalm. This is a worship text. This is the hymn book of ancient Israel that we're looking at here. So keep that in mind as we go as well. Other thoughts before we get rolling? All right, one other thing I want you to keep in mind. We talked about this the first week when we were talking about genres of psalm and types of psalm, like country music, those kinds of styles that we can have, hip hop versus classic versus rap. These are indications of a lament psalm. And these are the 5 categories that most everyone agrees is, these are things lament psalms have in them. You've got the opening address and invocation, O Lord, O God, that always addressing who it is you're talking to. Then you have the complaint, this is what my problem is, right? I'm sick, I'm tired, my enemies are after me, whatever it is. Then you have the petition, heal me, help me, hurt them, whatever it is you want God to do, falls into that. Then there is often a sort of a gap in the psalm that you can't see. But at some point in the psalm, you go from this petition to an affirmation of trust. And the lament psalms all have a moment of trust. They all have a moment of happiness, with one exception. You'll never guess what that exception is. Yeah, Psalm 88. We're looking at the exception today. It doesn't have an affirmation of trust. And then there's a doxology that is a celebration of who God is, right? The God of all creation, the God who has heard me, the God who heals me. There's a moment of celebration of that as well. So not every lament psalm has all of these elements, just like not every country song had all the elements of a country song that we talked about, but there's enough when you hear them that you know, yes, this qualifies to be a country song, this qualifies to be a hip-hop song, etc. this psalm is fascinating because it doesn't have an affirmation of trust. It also doesn't have other things. And we're going to look at that as we go. So just keep this list in mind as we look at this just really amazing psalm. Okay? Keep that in your head. Psalm 88. A psalm of the Korahites to the leader according to the Mahalath Leanoth, a maskil of Heman the Ezrahite. That is quite a title that it put together. First, a couple things to notice. This is a psalm of the sons of Korah. So this is a Korahite psalm, as we've talked about. They have their bits in there in the 40s, and then also here at the end there are several Korahite psalms. However, this Korahite psalm is by Heman the Ezrahite. But as I tell the students, sooner or later, every boy band breaks up and someone tries a solo career, right? That happens. That just always happens. And so apparently, this is Heman the Ezrahite's solo try at hymn writing as we go through. He's released his own album here. This is the Mahalath Leanoth, probably a hymn tune. Could be an instrument, but probably a hymn tune that they would be familiar with that we have lost to history. So just one of those things that I like to take a moment to dwell on and remind us that we don't know everything about these words and where they come from, and it was music. And I think sometimes just acknowledging the things we don't know is a helpful, humbling factor here. Let's look at this. O Lord, God of my salvation. I hope you've enjoyed this positive beginning. That's it. Okay? When at night I cry out in your presence, let my prayer come before you. Incline your ear to my cry, for my soul is full of troubles and my life draws near to Sheol. I'm counted among those who go down to the pit. I'm like those who have no help, like those forsaken among the dead, like the slain that lie in the grave, like those whom you remember no more, for they are cut off from your hand. You have put me in the depths of the pit, in the regions dark and deep. Your wrath lies heavy upon me, and you overwhelm me with all of your waves. You have caused my companions to shun me. You have made me a thing of horror to them. I am shut in, so I cannot escape. My eye grows dim through sorrow. Every day I call on you, O Lord. I spread out my hands to you. Do you work wonders for the dead? Do the shades rise up to praise you? Is your steadfast love declared in the grave, or your faithfulness in Abaddon, or destruction? Are your wonders known in the darkness, or your saving help in the land of forgetfulness? But I, O Lord, cry out to you. In the morning my prayer comes before you. O Lord, why do you cast me off? Why do you hide your face from me? Wretched and close to death, from my youth up I suffer your terrors. I'm desperate. Your wrath has swept over me. Your dread assaults destroy me. They surround me like a flood all day long. From all sides they close in on me. You have caused friend and neighbor to shun me. My companions are in darkness, or my only companion is darkness. Either translation is totally appropriate here. The last word in this psalm is not an affirmation of trust. The last word in this psalm, literally, in English and in Hebrew, is darkness. That is where this psalm ends. It ends in darkness. So,
What did Heman do?
what did Heman do? Well, he decided to go to God. That is one of the fascinating things about this psalm, is that Heman the Ezrahite has decided to bring his concerns to God. He has been a faithful prayer day and night. He's come to God in the morning. In the morning, earlier in the Sons of Korah Psalms, in 42 and 45 to 49, I believe, God answers in the morning. Right? Joy comes in the morning. That's a Korahite psalm. Here, in the morning, my prayer comes before you. Why do you cast me off? So now he's praying in the morning, and he's not met with joy. He's not met with any answer from God in this. So I have to tell you about this psalm. Cindy, when she went to seminary, she took an Old Testament class, and she took it from actually a friend of mine. Dennis Tucker was the professor of that class. And she said, I've got to write a paper on the Psalms. I said, of course you do, because Dennis is a Psalms guy as well. And she said, is there an interesting psalm? And I said, yes. She goes, well, I mean, is there something, just, a psalm that you think is different or special or kind of unique? And I said, Psalm 88 is kind of. She said, okay. So then she leaves. And about 2 weeks later, I see her, sitting in a chair, and she's reading her Bible. I said, "What are you doing?" And she goes, "Oh, I'm reading Psalm 88." I said, "Did you already submit?" She goes, "Yeah." I said, You signed up for Psalm 88 without reading Psalm 88 after I suggested this?" She goes, "Yeah, I trusted you." Now I'm panicked. Now she's writing a paper on Psalm 88, and she didn't read Psalm 88. And she reads it, and I'm sitting here waiting now on the edge of the couch. How is she going to respond to this psalm? And she looks up at me and she says, "This psalm is amazing. It's great. This is a chaplain psalm." And I said, I said, "Wow, sure." I'm just glad that she actually read the psalm. But it's a chaplain psalm. It's a psalm that actually is able to address God in an honest way, in a real life way. And so Cindy this is her favorite. She was real sorry they were practicing their Creative Praise Arts worship right now, because she wanted to be down here for Psalm 88, because she loves it as much as I do. But it is a remarkable dose of honesty in this psalm that you get. The psalmist is able to pray. I mean, look, I was raised in church. I grew up in church. I was born on Monday, and in my local Southern Baptist church was for next Sunday. All right, Mom would have insisted on it. And I would never go to God like this. I would never go to a teacher like this, much less to God like this. I mean, the psalmist, "You have put me in the depths of the pit. Your wrath lies heavy upon me. You have caused my companions to shun me. Every day I call on you. Every day I'm praying. Every day I'm coming before you, and I'm not getting any answers in this guy." So there is such anguish in this psalm, and such struggle in this psalm. And this is a worship song. This is everybody saying, "My life's terrible, it's God's fault." Everybody. I mean, that's the hymn that we have here. God, look what you have done to me. And so when I wrestle with this honesty, I was reminded of a trip I took to Greece with some students. Now, I was with a colleague of mine who was leading the trip. I think I've shared this story before. And the students, we ate at Jim Grill Place right near Meteora. For those of you who've been to Greece, Meteora is, do you like James Bond? It was where the evil guy lived in For Your Eyes Only. That was they're monasteries that are in these beautiful mountainous regions in Greece. And about James Bond, I started getting nods on that one. "Oh, right, yes, okay." Because we were eating at this restaurant, and they had souvlaki, really good souvlaki. And so I got some souvlaki. And I was talking to these students, and they were Dan's students. They weren't my students. So I was just with Dan, and I was sort of the extra person. And he was a different institution. And so I was getting to know them, and we were laughing and having a good time. And then Dan walks up, and this is a professor that my oldest son is named after. He's the reason I'm in this whole business. He means a great deal to me. And Dan goes, "Rob, you got souvlaki in your teeth." He's like, "What?" I'm like, "I got souvlaki right in the middle, the front of my mouth. I've got this souvlaki." And I looked at the students and I said, "None of you would tell me this? I've been sitting here for 15 minutes with souvlaki in my teeth and nobody's saying anything?" It took Dan to come over, someone who I knew who could tell me, "Hey, you got souvlaki in your teeth." And as I think about that story and I think about the psalm, what I'm saying is that perhaps my reticence to pray to God in this way is not a sign of my piety, it's not a sign of my respect, but more a sign of a shallow relationship. That the people who can be the most honest with me are the people I'm closest to in my life. And here, Heman the Ezrahite is able to bring a level of honesty to God that frankly makes all of us so comfortable. I mean, I'm going to be honest. This is a psalm that makes most people, and to think about praying to God this way, doesn't it seem disrespectful? Doesn't it seem irreverent? Doesn't it seem impious? But no, here the psalmist, Heman, is able to come to God honestly and openly with there is a beautiful quality of Hebrew prayer throughout the Old Testament that seems to acknowledge that God knows you're thinking it, you might as well tell him. I mean, that just seems to be God's attitude, and the psalmist's attitude all the way through this, is there's no holding anything back. And the psalmist seems to realize that God is not going to punish them for this kind of honesty. In fact, I believe God is at work within the canonical process. I believe that the books we have and the psalms we have are because God is at work in the shaping of that throughout human history. In other words, this psalm is in the book of Psalms, I believe, because God wanted to make sure this psalm got in the book of Psalms. So as though God said, hey, you know that psalm where everybody's blaming me for trouble and all the problems? Make sure that one's in there. That's a great one. I love that. Wow. But that is the level of, and I think I shared before too, Hebrew prayer, that the word for prayer is always reflexive. That technically, if you wanted to pray, it would be David, or translate it, David prayed himself to God, Moses prayed himself to God, Joshua prayed himself to God. I think within that little grammatical feature is the parable for this, that you take who you are where you are to God. And if who you are where you are is joyful, if who you are where you are is thanksgiving, then you take that to God. Absolutely. But if who you are where you are is despair, if that's anger, that's prayer too. Anger is prayer, frustration is prayer, bitterness is prayer, joy is prayer, thanksgiving is prayer. All of those things are prayer. And God is desiring that we put that on the altar as prayers, that we take who we are where, because there's a word for not taking who you are where you are to God. If you're not representing who you are, there's the word for that is hypocrisy. Right? That you put on this acting face, that you find the right word, this practiced piety, these right, this is what happens whenever I know Marcus found this, I found this, I'm sure some of you who are, we don't think we have any other ordained folks in the crowd, some of our deacons are here, so they understand what this is like. You end up at a family gathering and you're the only one qualified to pray over the food. Have you noticed this? Some of you ever had this experience? Yeah. And you end up someplace, because apparently I know the kind of thing God likes to hear.
It's secret language.
It is what it is. That's right. That's what they're expecting. It's something that we're going to invoke the special words God's like. Or we're going to heckle when someone else is praying, right? God doesn't want to hear that. Start over. Right? Is that what they're expecting? People have this anxiety about prayer, and immediately, the greatest moment ever was when I was at the rehearsal dinner for Cindy's nephew, his wedding, and we're standing in a circle, and we're about to eat, and the guy who's leading it says, Brother Wallace is going to ask the blessing, and then we're going to eat. And I thought, well, nobody talked to me, but all right, I'm used to that. And so everybody bowed their head. I inhaled, and I promise you, I was half a second from starting the prayer, and the guy next to me started praying. Turns out he was Brother Wallace too. I didn't know that was his name. And I was this close to turning it into a charismatic prayer meeting. It was just, I was almost there. Because I just assumed, again, that, okay, fine, nobody wants to pray. I'll talk to God for you, I suppose. And so we get anxiety about this, and what God is desperately desiring is, what is this? What is our relationship about? It's about communication. Bring who you are to me and talk to me about that. And so this psalm is a reminder that what God deeply desires is that kind of honesty in prayer. So I've been talking a long time now. So what are the thoughts and questions and struggles you have? Because some of you are smiling and have looks of relief, and some of you are making frowny face at me. So we can maybe walk through this anxiety together.
The things that interested me and I struggled with a bit is Sheol and the pit.
Sure.
Now, that translates to hell in modern English.
Well, grave is the best English translation. Yeah. Sheol is where people go when they die. So
it's a separate concept from the concept of hell.
it is, yes. You don't get the full-blown understanding of hell until after the exile. When we read the Old Testament, when you read Sheol, it is probably the better analogy is Hades, sort of the Greek sense of a sort of shadowy realm that everyone goes to, where there's no knowledge of self or knowledge of God or praise of God. Now, probably not quite purgatory. What's funny is, though, you even see that concept change even in the Psalms, because say here, I'm counted among those who go to Sheol, who do the dead rise up to praise you? The implication would be, no, they don't, right? The dead can't praise God. And yet when you get to Psalm 139, the psalmist says, where can I go to escape from you? If I go to the highest heaven, you're there. If I go to Sheol, you're there. So that you even see that concept get broader throughout the Psalms. But here, he's thinking, once I'm dead, that's it. and I'm going to be dead, and you don't have a chance to fix this and make this. Yeah, my life is hard, and you can't fix it in heaven. He doesn't have that option. My life is hard, and I'm going to die, and that's, what are you doing, God? What is that about? So it's that kind of struggle. Go ahead.
Are you saying they had a concept of heaven at this point?
No, I'm saying they didn't have a concept of heaven. So God, we tend to think that even when someone's life is hard, we can fix it later. Now it's okay. Now they're all right. Now they've had, this psalmist, God's going to fix it now or not, and that's it. It's his life is facing that. Yeah, Jim.
Maybe it's a shallow reading, but throughout the whole psalm,
Mm-hmm.
there is a constant theme, and that is loss of human friendship.
Yes. No, I think that's absolutely right. In a culture where
Not
community,
abandonment by God, but a loss of human friendship.
God and people,
And he's lamenting that.
he is in a culture where community is everything, right? I mean, we tend to be very individualistic, but in a world where community is everything, he's not got that. That's also one of the big laments of Job in Job 19. Job 19 is all about losing companionship, his wife, his family, his friends. Same thing. Yeah. Right.
The sense of abandonment that you mentioned reminds me of Christ.
Absolutely.
Absolutely.
What's that? Oh, that the sense of abandonment lives very much of Christ's abandonment. Oh, my God, why have you forsaken me? I think that prayer on the cross is a great example of this. That Christ in crucifixion felt abandoned. Now we would argue that he's not. I would also argue heaven is not abandoned. But that doesn't change the way heaven feels. And I think that heaven is aware of God. He's aware of God's saving help. He's aware of God's faithfulness and steadfast love, and he's aware of God's wonders. But all he has found is abandonment and frustration, and yet he's still praying, and that's something. But he is wrestling with the knowledge of who God is and what he has heard of God, wonders and saving help and miracles and faithfulness, and the reality of God seeming to be a friend of chaos. Look at the way your wrath has swept over me. They surround me like a flood. Look at all that water language. Remember that water is terrifying in the ancient Near East. Nobody liked water. The sea was terrifying. Except the Phoenicians. For some reason, the Phoenicians were fine. Everyone else, the sea will kill you. And the dragons live there. And so using water and sea language to talk about the way God is responding to you is to basically say God is an agent of chaos in my life, not an agent of help or wonder or faithfulness. It is accusatory in a way that Job does the same in Job 3, asking Leviathan to raise, invoking chaos in that moment. God is bringing the chaos. God is not bringing the creation in the life of Ezra. And yet, here it is. So, real quick question. You've got this one. I've already told you it doesn't have an affirmation of trust. I was going to go back up, but I'm sure you guys can remember. It doesn't have an affirmation of trust. What else does this psalm not have?
Petition.
Yeah?
I didn't see petition.
Yeah, that's right. That's funny because that's not the one they normally get first. That's the one I want people to guess, but you guessed it first. So you jumped to the end on me there, Jane. But that's okay. That's right. When you have gifted pupils, what are you going to do? You can't, it doesn't have an affirmation of trust. It doesn't have a doxology unless you count God of my salvation as a doxology. Okay. It's a little weak, and it's at the front, so I don't know that doxology is the right. Maybe, but I tend to think no, it doesn't. It does have an invocation, O Lord, God of my salvation. I think it has a complaint. I feel pretty good saying that. Yeah. No affirmation of trust, no doxology, no petition. The psalmist doesn't ask God for anything here. The psalmist reminds God that the psalmist has asked God for things on a regular basis, a lot, that God hasn't answered. But he doesn't ask God for anything except one thing. You see what he asks God for?
Let my prayer come before
Let my prayer come. Listen to me. That's all he asked God to do. Listen to me.
On that point, it seems like he's saying now. The petition is now, because he talks about, it hasn't been from my youth up.
Right.
I'm desperate now. The word now somehow.
Listen to me today.
Yeah.
Right? Finally, hear me, God. This psalm is about, hey God, listen to this. I just wanted to let you know that my life is really hard and I know it's your fault. Thank you. That's it. That's the whole message of this song. I have no friends. I have no community. I have no hope in death. I have no help in life. I just, thank you. And now I'm out. I wonder why we only have one psalm of Heman the Ezrahite in the psalm. This is his only swing, right here. What happened right after this? But it was kind of dark. Yeah.
Any more background on the guy?
Not a word. No. Enough.
Born a quadriplegic.
You know, one of the amazing things about the Psalms, and I will also say Paul, is we never get identification of what Paul's thorn in the flesh is. And most of the time, we don't know what's troubling the psalmists. And as a result, it's really easy for us to relate to. It's really easy for us to read into our struggles in these circumstances. As they talk about these things, you know, my bed is wet with my tears and my bones are drying up and aching. And so rather than what I've seen some people do is like, well, the bones drying up is a common malady that would occur in the ancient Near East due to the bacteria. No, right? It's a song, right? Let's not get too overly literal with this. This is a person who is struggling, whose body is withering away and having, now all of a sudden there's a lot of people that can relate to that. There's a lot of people that can sing that song. And, you know, God, it hurts. It hurts. Now, what I have to commend Heman the Ezrahite for in all of this, let me say real quick, two things I want to commend him for. I did this song at a men's retreat once. I was talking about the men's retreat, and I said, so what are your reactions to this song? And there was this one guy that really goes, oh, it sounds like a whiner to me. Okay. One reading, I suppose. I said, all right, well, in light of that, what do you think it says that God wanted this song in the Bible and that it is a worship text instructing us how to come into the presence of God? And his response was, huh. So I got through to him. I was glad about that. But the other thing I have to commend Heman the Ezrahite for is he is still talking to God. He's still addressing God. Day after day after day, he has addressed God and gotten no answer. Day after day after day, he has had no hope and no help. And yet, he opens the psalm with, O Lord, the God of my salvation. He's still talking. He's still in a relationship, which, as I've said to many of my students, puts him way ahead of me. Right? At those times when I get frustrated or I get angry, those are times I will often shut off. Right? I go off and slam my door, and that's it, God. If this is the way you're going to be, we're not talking. Right? That's not Heman the Ezrahite. He's addressing directly God, who he has a problem with.
Yes, a good point. He has not turned to another God.
He hasn't.
And there were plenty of
Plenty of options for him. And so I was probably trying to put him down for that. And he didn't want to do it. And so he turns around and he puts his hand on his hip, this little 2.5-year-old Daniel, and stomps his foot and says, I hate you. And he walks off to bed. Right? Well, of course, I giggled. I mean, how do you not? So just being told. And I guess what I wanted to say is, years later, when Daniel asked to borrow the car, I never came back and said, well, I'd like to. But you know, when you were 2, you told me you hated me. Just haven't gotten over that. He was 2. That's what 2-year-olds do. I mean, a Catholic priest friend of mine says there's no better illustration for the total depravity of humanity than a 2-year-old. There is no other explanation for that behavior than total depravity. I get it. Now, if I, being unrighteous, can see that and extend that level of grace to a 2-year-old expressing an honest feeling that was coming from that 2-year-old, how much more can my Father in heaven be able to handle the prayers that I offer back and understand where I am, even if I don't fully understand or I don't see the picture, but I have an honest relationship that is continuing with God. That, how much more can God hear that and offer grace in those circumstances? So what we're going to see this week, what we're going to see next week, and you're going to see it whenever you read the Psalms, but next week also in Psalm 89, is a psalmist who has no problems being completely honest with the divine. That God is not Zeus sitting on a mountain ready to zap you when you get out of line or make the wrong statement. God is desperately interested in dialogue and conversation and honest dialogue and honest conversation. So we're going to see that throughout the Psalms. We're going to see that in 89 as well. But you see why I love this psalm so much. It is a chaplain psalm, and it's one that goes right where we are. So, final thoughts? Yes, ma'am.
I think it's particularly apropos today with the events of the last
Absolutely.
24 hours.
Absolutely. Yeah. The light of El Paso and Dayton without question. Without question. Yeah.
There was another one overnight at about 1 a.m.
Yeah. In Dayton.
That was
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. Sue Ellen said that all of her family is okay. She can check in. All right. Well, I will let you go. Get a good seat for worship today, because we're going to talk about honest worship now. These children are going to bring who they are, where they are to the divine. I promise. See you next week. Oh, by the way, snarkiest doxology in the Bible next week. That's my tease. Snarkiest doxology. Oh, see you tonight for Faith Food and Fellowship. Thank you.